As you recall, when God was freeing the Israelites out of bondage and he had took them out of Egypt and he appointed Moses to lead his people when they were walking through the wilderness, he had gone to Moses and he told him that he was going to give his children a land. He was going to give them a land and he was going to give them the power to overcome their enemies and take this land. I'm going to look at the book of Numbers chapter 13, verse 1 through 2, and it says, "And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Send thou men that they may search the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel. Of every tribe of their fathers shall he send a man, every one a ruler among them." So the Lord already told Moses to send some children, send some men to search out this land, because he already said he gave it to them. Meaning God had already given them a promise. God, meaning he had appointed this land for his children. He already set this aside for his people. So this is what happens. A lot of times God will put something in our spirit. He'll give us a promise. He'll give us a word and let us know that, hey, I gave you something. I'm giving this to you. This is yours. And when he puts it in our hearts, when he relays it to our spirit, that means it's already ours. We have to think of it as, this is mine. It belongs to me. No matter what the obstacles are, no matter what the challenges you might face, no matter how many enemies are fighting against you who are trying to deter and keep you from having what it is, God had already said you could have it. It's yours. He gave it to you. When he says he gives us something, that means it's ours. No matter how it looks, no matter who doesn't want us to have it, it belongs to us. And see, God was ready to give this land to the people. He told them to search this out, but guess what? Something happened that caused them not to receive this land. See, something happened. There has to be something that happens to keep you from receiving what it is that God already gave you. See, when God gives you something that's yours, unless there's something that happens that will now prevent you from getting and obtaining what it is that God has already given to you. Now, I'm going to read from the book of Numbers, chapter 13, verses 30 through 33. Now, and it says, "And Caleb stilled the people before Moses and said, Let us go up at once and possess it, for we are able to overcome it. But the men that went up with him said, We be not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. And they brought up an evil report of the land which they had searched unto the children of Israel, saying, The land through which we had gone to search it is a land that eateth up the inhabitants thereof. And all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the giants, the sons of Anak, which come up the giants, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight." So let's back up a little bit. Now, God already told Moses to send some man because I gave you this land. He was giving them the land of Canaan, a land that flowed with milk and honey. This was the promised land. See, God had placed a promise into the hearts of his people. He had told them, I gave you this. So when they went out to see the land, they saw all of the beautiful things. They saw the land flowing with milk and honey. They saw the huge grapes with stature. It took people more than one man to hold these clusters of grapes because they were so big. And the land was plentiful. It was filled with much harvest, much fruit. There was plenty to eat. The land was flourished. It was abundance in this land. And God has set this land aside for his people because he gave them a provision. He was going to give them a place where they would have whatever it was that they needed. God was providing them with this. He was blessing them. He had brought them out of bondage when they were held in captivity by the Egyptians. They were holding them in captivity, and God freed them. They walked through the wilderness. They went through all of this stuff, and they saw all the miracles, all the stuff that God performed by sending manna from heaven and feeding them water, giving them water to drink out of a rock. They saw all of these things that God did when they couldn't see. He had the light right before them. He came forth as a cloud, and he provided for his people in the wilderness. He brought them out of Egypt. He parted the Red Sea when their enemies was coming after them. But when they came to this promised land that God already said that he gave to them, he delivered it to them. They saw these giant men, and they said, the men are of great stature. We can't overcome them. Oh no, we can't do this. All of that stuff that God had done, all the miracles that they had saw and witnessed with their very eyes, all the difficulties, all of the distresses, all the miracles that God performed, everything they have overcome through his help, all of a sudden that stuff no longer mattered. They had forgotten. All of a sudden they had obtained amnesia because they no longer trusted God. They no longer trusted God's power and his strength. And so what did the men say? They said that in our eyes, we were as grasshoppers. So we were in theirs. So this is what it is. When you think of yourself, when you begin to diminish your value and your character based off somebody else, when you look at somebody else, doesn't matter how much education they have, doesn't matter how much status they have, doesn't matter how prominent they are, doesn't matter how big they are, how much money they have, doesn't matter how many people with them. If God already said, I gave this to you, this is yours, then you have it already, because see, God has put some inside of you that allows you to overcome whoever it is or whatever is standing in your way. It does not matter what it is that they have. It doesn't matter what type of challenge they present. It doesn't matter, because see, with God's power, With God's power, we have the power to overcome. But see, a lot of people, they get to looking at things. They get to looking and they get to try to understand with their own physical eyes instead of understanding what God understands. See, God's ways are higher. And see, he likes to do things when it looks like a challenge, when something looks like it can't be acquired or something that looks like it's impossible to obtain. See, this is where God's glory becomes to come in now, because see, it takes his hand to move, and you can't give yourself the credit because you knew the odds were against you. And see, this is where God thrives. This is where his power prevails, and this is where he triumphs. But see, you have to have the faith. You have to trust him that when he already said, I'm going to give it to you and I'm going to do it, you have to look and believe as if he has already done it. Because if you don't, and then you start to say, hey, my enemy's too big. They too strong. And God looking at you like, and what am I? What am I? Because you're not trusting in your enemies. See, you're not trusting in your own power because you might be small. What does it say? When we are weak, who is strong? Greater is he who is in us than he who's in the world. So it don't matter how many enemies you got. You might have all the enemies in the world coming up against you, but if you got a God on your side, all you need is Lord God Almighty, Jehovah, and that's who you have. See, what had happened? See, Caleb, he already knew. He had that spirit to say, hey, we can overcome because God gave us the land. He already trusted in his God. It didn't matter how big a giant was. It didn't matter how many it was. It didn't matter what stature these men were. See, Caleb knew who his God was. And he didn't look at these men and say, oh, they powerful. No, he understood God's power, because it don't matter as long as you got God. It don't matter how big your enemies are or how giant and how powerful your enemies are or how many they didn't get to come up against you. Because see, when you got Lord God Almighty and you contending with him on your side, you have already triumphed and you are already victorious. But see, a lot of people, they forget. And see, they start to forget who God is because they're looking at the difficulties in front of them. They're looking at the opposition and they begin to trust in the opposition. And then they're looking at themselves. That's when you already messed up, because you ain't supposed to look at yourself. You ain't supposed to look at yourself. When God's telling you that you're going against something, when you're trying to overcome and you have a challenge in front of you, you don't look at yourself. You keep your eyes focused on God. And that's what you have to do. But see, the Israelites, they began to complain. They started to cry. They started complaining, saying, well, what did you bring us out here? Why did you bring us out of Egypt? We should just stay in Egypt. If you brought us here, because see, you brought us here to face these giants, and we can't defeat these giants. They started to cry. And they started to complain. They got mad and said, we should have just went back to Egypt. We should just go back. God, I wouldn't go back to bondage. Now you want to go back. And see, let's just go back. I'm going to go back to Egypt. That's what they were saying. And see, God was provoked sore. He was provoked, and this is what he said. See, he had already given them the land. But see, they didn't trust God. They trusted in themselves. And they looked at their enemies. They saw their enemies as giants, and they saw themselves small and minuscule. But so they said in their eyes, they became that way. Because they saw themselves as giants. They saw themselves as small. That's how they look toward their enemies. See, when your enemy sees that you don't trust God, when you don't trust your own God, and your enemy see that you see yourself as inferior, guess what? They're going to see you as inferior. See, when you look at God, and you know that you have a victorious God, no matter what the obstacles look like, no matter how much the challenge is, no matter how great and big and how strong the opposition is that's coming up against you, you keep your eyes on God. You don't start to let that deter you, because you focus on who your Lord is. When you start to think about who God is and what he allows you to overcome, what he has triumphed you through, because as David said, he reminded himself all the time of what God has done. He said, you teach my hands how to war. With your power, I have leaped over a troop. I have run through a troop and leaped over a wall. That's what you see. David knew how to pep himself up in God, because he had that trust in the Lord God Almighty. He did not forget what the Lord had delivered him from. He did not forget the obstacles that the Lord has allowed him to come through and get through. He remembered what the Lord has allowed him to accomplish, the feats and the victories that he had, because he gave the credit to God. And see, when you're looking at yourself, this is why your enemy can overcome you and prevail. This is why a lot of you cannot make it into the promises. This is why we get left behind, because we start to lose focus off of God, and we start to focus on ourselves. We start to look at the opposition. We start to look at the enemy who's in front of us. We start to look at the challenges that we have to face. Oh, no, this is too hard. I'm going to turn back around. I'm going to turn back around. You see, my enemies, they too big, they too powerful, they got too much money. Oh, they got too many people behind me. This thing, man, I've been like this for too long. Oh, this sickness, this illness, the doctor already said ain't no way, heck, that I'm going to get delivered. So all the doctors told me ain't no possibility for me to get healed. So I guess I ain't going to get healed. No. See, now you trusting in the wrong thing. You see, you're making your illness bigger than your God. You're making your enemy bigger than your God. You're making your challenges bigger than your God. You're making your difficulties bigger than your God. You're making the curses bigger than the Lord God. But God said, I'm bigger. He says, no one before me. He is overcoming. He says, greater am I. He is greater than whatever it is that you have to face. He is greater than the sickness. He is greater than the disease. He is greater than the husband who wanted a divorce. He is greater than the woman who tried to break up your marriage. He is greater than the child who is wayward and getting himself in all kinds of trouble. He is greater than the enemy who wants to fight you relentlessly. He is greater than your enemies at work who want to sabotage you and take your spot. See, if you start to trust in him, that's when you're going to start to see some victory. And what happened? Let's talk about what happened. See, God did not like that. See, God said, let's keep going back here. Because see, I'm reading here from Numbers, chapter 14, verse 22 to 24. Because see, the people, they got all up in arms. The people was upset now. Because they thought, hey, this is pointless. This is hopeless. Ain't no hope. We came out here for nothing. We walked through this wilderness for nothing. We can't overcome these giants. They began to lose hope. They didn't trust God no more, even after everything he had done. And so this is what happened. It says, because all those men which have seen my glory and my miracles, which I did in Egypt and in the wilderness, and have tempted me now these 10 times, and have not hearkened to my voice, surely they shall not see the land, which I swear unto their fathers, neither shall any of them that provoke me see it. But my servant Caleb, because he had another spirit with him, and have followed me fully, him will I bring into the land wherein he went, and his seed shall possess it. So the Lord told Moses, these people didn't trust me. After everything I've done, I delivered them through all this stuff. And they got the audacity to not have faith in me. They got the audacity to give up and say they want to go back to Egypt and think that they can't overcome these enemies when I already put them in their hands. I already said that I gave them the land, meaning I gave them the strength and the power to prevail against them no matter how it looked. But they did not trust in me. They forgot who I am. And so they ain't going to be allowed to enter to my promised land. But see, Caleb, since he believed in me and he trusted me, Caleb is going to inherit this land. Because see, I ain't letting no wicked person go inherit my land. See, God looking at your heart, he said, when you don't believe and trust in me, you wicked. And he allowed Caleb to enter the land because, see, Caleb never doubted. Caleb knew who God was. He trusted him. And this is what we have to endeavor to. We have to desire to have a spirit like Caleb. See, Caleb trusted God. Caleb did not doubt. It didn't matter how big the giants were. It did not matter the opposition or his adversary. He didn't care how his adversary looked. See, Caleb did not look on his eyes and think. He trusted in God no matter how it looked. He trusted God. He remembered what God had delivered him through. This is why we have to remember what God had brought us through. We can't look at each obstacle and challenge and say, oh, well, it's too big. No, you have a God that's greater than any problem that you will ever face. He is greater than the mountain that you must climb. He will take you to new heights as long as you trust in him. As long as you believe in him, it don't matter what your enemy's doing. It don't matter how much they want to keep coming up against. Let them do what they're going to do. Because as long as you trust in God, it ain't going to matter. They can't do nothing to stop you. The only one who can stop you is you. The only one who can stop you when you got God on your side is you. And that's why we have to ask God every day. We have to pray and ask, Lord, give me a spirit like Caleb had. Because see, Caleb believed. He knew God was going to overcome. He knew with God, he had the victory already. Because see, God, that's how much trust he had in him. And you can't lose your faith. You have to have hope in God. You have to continue to have faith and remember everything, all the obstacles he has brought you through. And you have to stop. I know it's hard for a lot of us. It's hard for lives when we sit here, when we tearing and we prolonging and we patient in our struggles and adversities, and it look like the battle just won't end. It look like the enemy is coming back harder and harder, and we looking and we start to lose hope, and we want to complain, we want to get upset, we want to doubt, but it's the flesh kicking in. That's you got to lock into the spirit. You got to lock into what the word says. You have to get in prayer. You have to get on your knees when it look impossible. Your enemies keep on going and they ain't budging. You got to get on your knees and you got to pray to God. You got to rejoice and start praying and shouting. See, David knew how to sing and he rejoiced before God. Joshua and them rejoiced and they shouted and the walls crumbled. Sometimes you got to lift up a shout and you got to start crying out to God and thanking him and having mercy and trusting him despite what it looked like. But the walls to start to crumble, for the mountains to turn into molehills. You got to start shouting out to God and believing and trusting in him. You can look at yourself as a grasshopper. You look at God as a giant slayer.